It took exactly 47 minutes. 47 minutes for Senator Sheldon Whitehouse to systematically dismantle FBI Director Kash Patel's credibility using nothing but court records, congressional transcripts, and the kind of prosecutorial precision that comes from 2 decades as a federal prosecutor. What happened next wasn't just political theater, it was a masterclass in how to expose hypocrisy when the entire system is watching. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room felt heavy that morning in April 2025, not with anticipation, but with something darker: anger. The kind of cold, institutional anger that builds when people who are supposed to enforce the law decide the law doesn't apply to them. Senator Whitehouse entered the chamber carrying a leather portfolio that looked deceptively thin but contained enough documentation to end a career. Behind him, his chief of staff carried additional folders marked with colored tabs, each representing a separate false statement made under oath. The timing was almost too perfect to be coincidental. Exactly 24 hours earlier, former FBI Director Andrew McCabe had been formally indicted by a federal grand jury for making false statements to Congress. The same charges that had hung over his head for years had finally materialized into a criminal prosecution. McCabe, who had served the FBI for decades, who had risen to its second highest position, was now facing prison time for lying to congressional investigators about media leaks during the Trump-Russia investigation. The irony was not lost on anyone in that chamber, especially not on Sheldon Whitehouse. Whitehouse wasn't just any senator. Before entering politics, he had spent years as a United States attorney, prosecuting complex white-collar crimes in public corruption cases. He understood how to build a case, how to present evidence, how to corner a witness who thought they were too clever to be caught. His colleagues respected him even when they disagreed with him, recognizing that when Whitehouse said he had the receipts, he actually had the receipts. Kash Patel sat at the witness table with the same confidence he had displayed in previous hearings. Dark suit, American flag pin, FBI credentials prominently displayed. Behind him sat a team of FBI lawyers, their briefcases full of legal objections and executive privilege claims. Patel had weathered tough questioning before. He had survived multiple congressional appearances, handled hostile media interviews, navigated the treacherous waters of Washington politics. He thought he knew what was coming. He was wrong. The first 2 hours of the hearing proceeded as expected. Republican senators asked friendly questions about crime statistics and counterterrorism operations. Democratic senators probed various FBI controversies and alleged political bias. Patel delivered his standard responses with practiced ease, deflecting when necessary, pivoting when cornered, running out the clock with bureaucratic non-answers. By the time Whitehouse's turn came, Patel looked almost bored. That was his first mistake. Director Patel, Whitehouse began, his Rhode Island accent carrying a note of prosecutorial formality, I want to start by acknowledging that yesterday, exactly 24 hours ago, a federal grand jury returned an indictment against former FBI Director Andrew McCabe for making false statements to Congress. You're aware of that indictment, correct? Patel nodded tearfully. I'm aware of the indictment, yes. Good, Whitehouse said, opening his portfolio with deliberate precision, because I want to discuss 3 statements you made to this committee and to the House Judiciary Committee over the past 6 months. 3 statements that, according to court records and documentary evidence I have here, are demonstrably, verifiably, provably false. The temperature in the room dropped. Reporters leaned forward. Camera operators zoomed in tight on Patel's face. The FBI director's expression didn't change, but those watching closely noticed his shoulders tense slightly, his hands gripping the edge of the witness table just a fraction tighter. Let's start with statement number 1, Whitehouse began, his Rhode Island accent carrying a note of prosecutorial formality. On October 15th of last year, during testimony before this committee, you were asked about the FBI's investigation into classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago. Specifically, you were asked whether any FBI personnel had contact with representatives of the former president before the search warrant was executed. Your answer, and I'm reading directly from the transcript, no FBI personnel had any contact with representatives of the former president prior to the execution of the search warrant. Do you recall making that statement under oath?
Patel shifted in his seat. Senator, I was referring to official investigative contacts. Any conversations that may have occurred were preliminary and not part of the formal investigation. Whitehouse smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Director Patel, I have here a court filing from the special counsel's office, submitted just 3 weeks ago in federal district court in Florida. This filing includes a sworn declaration from FBI Special Agent Jennifer Rodriguez, who states unequivocally that she participated in a phone call with Trump attorney Christopher Kise on August 21, 2024, 6 days before the search warrant was executed, in which she discussed the scope of the investigation and the possibility of a voluntary surrender of documents. He held up the document, making sure the cameras could see the official seal. This wasn't a preliminary conversation, Director Patel. This was an FBI agent discussing an active investigation with the subject's attorney. Your statement to this committee was false. Would you like to revise your testimony now? The silence that followed was profound. Patel's lawyers leaned forward to whisper something, but Whitehouse was already moving to his next point. Let's move to false statement number 2, Whitehouse said, his voice gaining momentum. On December 3rd, during testimony before the House Judiciary Committee, you were asked about FBI surveillance of American citizens without warrants. Specifically, Representative Nadler asked you, has the FBI conducted any warrantless surveillance of American citizens on U.S. soil since you became director? Your answer, no, we have not conducted any warrantless surveillance operations. Do you remember that testimony? Patel's jaw tightened. Senator, you're taking my statement out of context. I'm referring to a FISA court opinion, Whitehouse interrupted, his prosecutorial instincts fully engaged now. Dated January 9th of this year. In this opinion, Judge Margaret Foster of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court specifically cites 17 instances of warrantless searches of American citizens' communications conducted by FBI personnel between September and November of last year. 17 instances, Director Patel, during your tenure. The FISA court found these searches violated the Fourth Amendment. Were you unaware of these violations when you testified to Congress that no such surveillance had occurred? The implications were staggering. Either Patel had lied to Congress, or he was so incompetent that he didn't know what his own bureau was doing. Neither option was good. Senator, those searches were conducted under existing authorities. Under authorities that the FISA court ruled were being violated, Whitehouse cut in. The question isn't whether you had legal theories to justify the searches. The question is whether you lied to Congress when you said no warrantless surveillance had occurred, and the documentary evidence says you did. Patel tried to respond, but Whitehouse was already pulling out the third tab. And now we come to false statement number 3, the most recent one. Just 6 weeks ago, during your confirmation hearing for your current position, Senator Durbin asked you directly about political interference in FBI investigations. His question, will you commit to this committee that you will not interfere or shut down investigations for political reasons? Your answer, and again I'm quoting directly, I give you my word that I will never interfere with any investigation for political purposes. He paused, letting the statement hang in the air. Director Patel, 3 days ago, the Washington Post published a story based on leaked FBI internal communications. These communications show that you personally ordered FBI field offices in 3 states to suspend investigations into January 6th participants who were politically connected to the current administration. Would you like to explain how that squares with your sworn testimony that you would never interfere with investigations for political reasons? The room erupted. Not literally, but the energy was electric. Reporters frantically typed on their phones. Congressional staffers exchanged looks of shock. Even some Republican senators looked uncomfortable, realizing that Whitehouse hadn't just made allegations, he had brought receipts. Patel tried to regain control. Senator, those investigations were suspended for legitimate resource allocation reasons. Director Patel, I don't care about your justifications. I care about your testimony. You told this committee under oath that you would never interfere with investigations for political reasons. 3 days later, internal FBI documents reveal you did exactly that. That's not a resource allocation decision, that's a false statement to Congress. And then Whitehouse delivered the knockout blow. He reached into his portfolio one final time and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Director Patel, this is the indictment that was returned yesterday against Andrew McCabe. I'd like to read you the relevant portion. Andrew McCabe did knowingly and willfully make materially false, fictitious, and fraudulent statements and representations to Congress regarding his authorization of media disclosures. He held up the document, making sure the cameras could see the official seal. 3 false statements, Director Patel. 3 documented, verifiable, provable false statements to Congress, the same number that Andrew McCabe is being prosecuted for. The only difference is that he made his statements when he was out of favor with the administration. You made yours while being protected by it. The silence was absolute. Even Patel's lawyers had stopped whispering. Everyone in that room understood what Whitehouse was saying. This wasn't just about catching someone in a lie. This was about exposing a 2-tiered system of justice, where consequences depended on political alignment rather than legal violations.
If you face no consequences while McCabe faces prosecution, Whitehouse said, his voice now carrying a note of anger that he rarely displayed, it will prove beyond any doubt that we have 2 systems of justice in this country, one for people politically aligned with the current administration and one for everyone else. He paused, letting that sink in. That's not the America we're supposed to be. That's not the rule of law we claim to uphold. That's banana republic justice, Director Patel. And if you think this committee is going to sit here and pretend we don't see what's happening, you're mistaken. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within hours, legal experts across the political spectrum were dissecting Whitehouse's presentation. Former prosecutors confirmed that the evidence he presented would constitute the basis for false statements charges in any other context. News networks ran split-screen comparisons of Patel's testimony and the documentary evidence contradicting it. Constitutional scholars warned about the erosion of congressional oversight when officials could lie with impunity as long as they had political protection. But the most damaging reaction came from within the Justice Department itself. Career prosecutors who had worked on the McCabe case watched Whitehouse's questioning and recognized the implications immediately. If McCabe could be prosecuted for false statements while Patel faced no consequences for similar conduct, it proved that the decision to prosecute wasn't based on legal standards, but political calculations. Several prosecutors quietly began updating their resumes, unwilling to work in a system where justice depended on partisan affiliation. The White House initially tried to defend Patel, with press secretary claiming that Whitehouse had taken statements out of context and engaged in political theater. But that defense collapsed when legal analysts pointed out that Whitehouse hadn't offered interpretations or theories. He had presented court records, FISA opinions, and internal FBI documents. The evidence wasn't ambiguous, it was damning. Conservative media found itself in an awkward position. Many had celebrated McCabe's indictment as proof that no one was above the law. Now they were faced with defending Patel despite evidence of similar conduct. Some tried to distinguish the cases on technical grounds, but the parallels were too obvious. A few honest conservative commentators acknowledged the double standard, warning that undermining the rule of law for short-term political gain would have long-term consequences. 3 weeks after the hearing, the Senate Judiciary Committee issued a criminal referral to the Justice Department, formally requesting that Patel be investigated for making false statements to Congress. The referral was bipartisan, with 2 Republican senators joining all Democratic members in supporting it. But everyone understood the referral was largely symbolic. Attorney General Pam Bondi, herself a Trump loyalist, was never going to prosecute one of the president's key allies for lying to protect the administration. And that was precisely Whitehouse's point.
The issue wasn't really whether Patel would be prosecuted. The issue was making it impossible for anyone to deny that the system was broken, that justice had become partisan, that the rule of law meant different things for different people depending on their political connections. By documenting the false statements so meticulously, by drawing the parallel to McCabe so clearly, Whitehouse had created a permanent record of institutional corruption that couldn't be explained away or spun into something else. Kash Patel remained FBI director, his position secure as long as he retained Trump's confidence, but his credibility was shattered. When he testified before Congress in subsequent hearings, senators from both parties referenced Whitehouse's questioning, treating his statements with open skepticism. The deference traditionally shown to FBI directors evaporated, replaced with the assumption that whatever Patel said under oath might be false.
The broader implications extended far beyond one person's credibility. Whitehouse had exposed something that many had suspected, but few had documented so thoroughly: that the Trump administration operated under different rules, where loyalty mattered more than legality, where political protection trumped prosecutorial standards, where the justice system had become a tool for rewarding friends and punishing enemies, rather than enforcing the law impartially. For Whitehouse himself, the hearing became a defining moment. He had entered politics after a career as a prosecutor, always maintaining that the rule of law was more important than partisan advantage. In 47 minutes, he had proven that prosecutorial skills could still matter in politics, that careful preparation and documentary evidence could cut through spin and deflection, that one senator who knew how to build a case could still hold powerful people accountable, even when the system was rigged in their favor. The McCabe-Patel comparison became shorthand for understanding the corruption of the justice system under Trump's second term. Legal scholars cited it in articles about the erosion of prosecutorial independence. Ethics professors used it as a teaching example of how political systems decay when consequences depend on partisan affiliation. Future historians would point to it as a moment when the problems with American justice became impossible to deny. Sometimes the most important victories aren't about winning immediate consequences. Sometimes they're about creating a record so clear, so documented, so irrefutable, that no amount of political spin can obscure the truth. Senator Whitehouse didn't get Kash Patel prosecuted, but he did something arguably more important. He proved with evidence that would survive any scrutiny that America had abandoned the principle that no one is above the law. And once that's proven, once it's documented in official congressional records with supporting evidence that can't be dismissed, it becomes much harder for those in power to pretend everything is fine. In 47 minutes, using nothing but preparation, evidence, and prosecutorial precision, Sheldon Whitehouse had exposed a truth that the powerful wanted hidden: that justice in America had become a privilege available only to those with the right political connections. That's not the country we're supposed to be, but it's increasingly the country we've become. And now, thanks to one senator's meticulous work, nobody can credibly deny it anymore.